If you want to start getting ready, you can. I got a fairly long passage here that I'll read and quickly go through it. I've only got 5 minutes, so I'll have to hurry. It's found in Proverbs chapter 3. Over the years, this has been one of my favorite passages. In fact, part of this was part of Brenda and Mai's wedding verse, and it was good to go through it again and just look how good God is and the good things that He has for us. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. And so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh, and strength to your bones. Honor the Lord with your possessions, and the first fruits of all your increase, so that your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. Now, I find there's quite a bit of common themes throughout all those verses that I just read. In verse 1, it talks about not forgetting my law. And when I looked it up in the Greek, or the Hebrew, I think it was probably Hebrew. Greek is New Testament, Hebrew is Old Testament. To forget really means not to ignore it. Do not ignore God's law of instructions. And part of His instruction is the law of burnt offering, which is, to me, kind of depicts kind of what we do now for our tithe. We take our first fruits and we offer them to God. And in those days, I think a lot of the times they offered up their animals or their what they had, and they burnt them on the altar as a sacrifice, as a tithe to God. In verse 2, talks about life. And life is more than just a being here. Life is like green vegetation. It's flowing and fresh like water. It's lively. It's active. So it's not just, I'm here on this earth living life. Great. It's more than that. Peace comes with that. And the peace that it's talking about here is safety, is soundness, is welfare, health, prosperity, contentment, friendship with God, especially in a covenant relationship. And it talks about how these things, the life and the peace, will be added to you. It's an increase. God will cause to add. In verse 3, mercy is kindness and goodness and favor and pity, and truth is faithfulness and sureness and reliability. Talks about forsake, which means to depart from, to leave behind, both physically and mentally. In verse 4, it talks about the heart, which is your moral character, the soul of a heart of a man, or your way of thinking. As we go through these verses, there's always a couple of verses that talk about if you do this, then there's a result. And in 4, the result is favor, which is grace and acceptance. There's also understanding, which is insight and wisdom and discretion. In verse 5, it talks about trust. We need to trust in the Lord with all our heart. Everything. We need to be bold. We need to be secure. Feel safe. That's part of trusting God, is feeling safe. And you will gain understanding, which we all want, I'm sure. Verse 6, in all your ways acknowledge Him. Ways is like all your path, your habits, your mannerisms, your pathway, the course of life that you take. Acknowledge God in all those areas. Acknowledging is also to learn to know. So it's not that you know everything, it's a learning process. Also talks about directing your paths. Directing is to make smooth or to go straight. It's a journey. Verse 7, fear the Lord. Stand in awe, a reverence and honor, respect. And depart from evil. Turn aside, be totally removed from anything that is evil. And then we get a result again in verse 8 and 9. Some verses call it flesh. Some verses actually call it a navel, which is like your umbilical cord. So when you were born, you were attached to this umbilical cord, which gave you life. And if you fear the Lord and you depart from evil, it's like that cord giving you life. Also talks about your marrow or your bones. It's like giving it drink and refreshment to your bones. And in verse 9, talks about honoring the Lord with your possessions, and that's what we're dealing with right now with our tithes and with our offerings. Giving of our first fruits, our produce. And as a result, what do we get? He promises in verse 10, our barns will be full. Our storehouse, it'll be heaped together, it'll be abundant, plenty, to satisfy, to complete. So what we see here is God, to me, is all about increase. He's always wanting to increase you in every area of your life, whether it be your health, whether it be your relationship with one another, or your finances. God has laid out his blueprint for us to follow for that abundant life, and tithing is a really, really big piece of that blueprint. You can take up the offering now.